Welcome everybody to the Primary Sources in Teaching Online webinar series brought to you by the TPS Western Region at MSU Denver in partnership with the TPS Teachers Network. My name is Kyle Kleba. I'm the project coordinator for the TPS Western Region at MSU Denver, and I will be your host tonight. Keith Patterson, Crystal Payne, as well as the presenters will be monitoring the chat. So let them know if you have any questions or reach out to them for any comments as well. You can also use the raised hand tool to let us know if you have something to share. For those of you who would like a professional development for certificate for your participation, we will provide a link at the end to fill out a brief reflection and where to send the certificate. Our two-part program, really it's one part. It's going to be titled Let's Chat, Taking the QFT Online with EdTech Tools. Will be presented by host Sarah Westbrook, the Director of Professional Learning at RQI, the Right Question Institute, Katy Connolly, Education Program Associate at RQI, Laura Israelsen, who is a teacher librarian, Michelle Pearson, a social studies educator, and Jay Sorensen, who is an educational technology coordinator. So the first part, I think we're just going to have y'all fill out a quick poll to see your familiarity. So take a second to fill out that poll that popped up. And it's just I'm not seeing anybody fill out the poll, so I'm wondering if it.
Oh, I can see it, but can other people see the poll results?
Yep.
I'm seeing them.
I'm seeing them.
Maybe it just hasn't uploaded here.
Oh, Mary's not seeing the results.
Well, if you're not seeing them right now, 70% of people say that they're familiar, 15% say not familiar, and 15% say maybe a little bit.
We are coast to coast tonight. We've got Virginia buddies all the way to Washington, California to Maine and Massachusetts, and lots of people here. So thank you for being with us.
Welcome to everyone, and thank you so much. We're really grateful to Kyle for all his work behind the scenes, and thank you to the TPS Teachers Network and to Mary Johnson. Thank you to Teaching with Primary Sources Western Region and to everybody there. Thank you to all of the people who've joined us this evening, and it's really exciting to see everybody from all over the place. We are spread out ourselves too, and I'm going to close out the poll for now. So I just want to give everybody the chance to say hi. I'm Sarah Westbrook. I'm a former English teacher, now working at the Right Question Institute. I'm joined by Katy.
Hi.
Laura.
I'm the Education Program Associate at the Right Question Institute.
Thanks. Laura.
Laura Israelsen. I'm working as a digital coach in Denver Public Schools, but I've been, my background's as teacher librarian. So happy to be here tonight.
Thank you. Michelle.
I'm Michelle Pearson. I'm a social studies language arts teacher, but also a tech teacher as well. And what I do, and a historic preservationist. So middle school level, secondary, but have taught in K-8 forever. So there you go.
Thank you. And Jay.
Hi, I'm Jay Sorensen, EdTech coordinator in the Oxnard Union High School District in Southern California.
Well, so thank you. I really feel like I'm learning from the best here. So I really encourage you, drop questions in the chat box as we go. You have 3 pretty fantastic resources on the webinar tonight. And I also happen to know from snooping at who's joining that there are a lot of experts in the chat box participating too. So please keep that back channel going, and we're going to get to as many of your questions as we possibly can tonight. Okay, we are tweeting. There are a lot of us. A hashtag QFT might be your best bet, but you can find all of us on Twitter. Some of us are much more active than others. I'm talking about myself. Okay. And if you haven't yet, sounds like a lot of you have introduced yourself and where you're joining from. So if you haven't yet, that would be great. If you don't mind popping your first name and your location in the chat box. And yes, thank you. Thank you to everybody. Again, thank you for hosting us tonight. It's nighttime here at the East Coast. I understand it's probably still beautiful and sunny out there in California, Jay. So our plan tonight is to do a lot of collaborative learning, and we want to introduce you to a couple different EdTech tools that we think are really good and powerful for the question formulation technique. A lot of us are in these virtual spaces, some of us for the very first time. And so we want to give you a couple tools that we think are really our workhorses, as Laura might say, that they do everything and they're really easy to get up and get running on them. And then in the second half of the webinar, we're going to show you some resources that Michelle, Laura, and Jay have put together that are giving you some more advanced suggestions and just a lot of other places to extend your learning if that's something that you'd like to do. So let's get started. I know a lot of you, it looked like about 70% of you had some familiarity with the question formulation technique, or QFT. So I'm going very quickly just to make sure that we're all sort of on the same page. I understand that if you're new to the question formulation technique, you might want to go to writequestion.org when you have a chance. There are a lot of great introductory materials there. But if you are new, really don't worry, because we're all going through the process together in a couple minutes, and you'll be able to follow along as we go, and you'll learn the process through doing it yourself. So in a nutshell, the question formulation technique exists because we all believe in questioning and the power of questioning, not just as a skill for learning, but also as a skill for life. So there are a lot of academics, from scientists to historians, who are talking about questioning as one of the most important fundamental skills for learning. And it's not just in these sort of educational upper echelons, people who with their doctorate who are talking about this. The work of my organization, the Right Question Institute, actually started in Lawrence, Massachusetts, which is a working class town in the north of Massachusetts. And my co-directors, Dan and Luce, were working with parents as part of a dropout prevention program for their children. And one of the things they heard from parents over and over again was that they're not going to school because they don't even know what questions to ask. So asking questions was a really important skill that was foundational to participating in their children's education and decision-making about their children's education. So question formulation is not a skill that's just for people who are in positions of power. It's a skill for people to gain power when they feel like they don't have any. And so the mission of the organization became, how can you teach everyone this skill? How can every child learn this skill? And so that's where the question formulation technique started. We know that question asking declines dramatically as children grow older. So a lot of you at home, you might have small children around, and so it will come as no surprise that 3- and 4-year-olds are asking about 200 to 300 questions a day. That translates to about 30 questions per hour. As we age, there's a lot less research on how many questions that older children are asking. That's because it declines dramatically, so that older children might only be asking a couple questions an hour. So everything that we're doing today is about changing that dynamic and really bringing curiosity back into what you're doing with kids, even with the challenges that we're dealing with right now. And especially because of those challenges, questioning and curiosity might be the most powerful tool that we have. So I'm going to invite all of us to do some active question formulation technique learning together right now. And we're going to use a tool called Padlet. A lot of you are probably familiar with that. I am just learning, so be kind, and you'll see the template that I created. I know the three folks on here tonight can give you a lot of different tips and advice about how you might customize that tool and really use that tool to its maximum potential. But we'll start with my little template. And I like to say that I really only know enough to be dangerous at this point. So we're all in it learning together. Okay, so in it, what you're about to do on the Padlet template is the question formulation technique. You're going to produce questions, improve questions, strategize on how you might use your questions, and then reflect on what you learned. And really, in a nutshell, that's what the question formulation technique is. It's a step-by-step protocol where individuals are doing each one of those steps. This is the technique in a little bit more detail, and I'll return to this later. But for now, I'm going to ask us, it looks like, so if you have your first name starts between A and G, I'm going to send you to this Padlet link in a minute. If your first name starts with an H3P, I'm going to send you to the group 2 Padlet link. And if your first name starts Q through Z, I'm going to send you to the group 3 Padlet link. And the reason I'm doing 3 different Padlets is because I want to make sure that there's enough room for everybody. And if you're working with a really large group, it can get a little bit overwhelming to send everybody to the same place. So I'm going to ask that Laura, Michelle, Jay, or Katie, if you can put those links in the chat box.
They're there.
Oh, wow, you guys are on top of it.
That would be Kyle.
Okay, Kyle, thank you. So I'm going to ask everybody to head over to that Padlet, and you'll see on my screen, I'm going to move away from the Zoom and into the Padlet also. And then we're going to start working from there. So I'm going to give everybody about 30 seconds. Try to figure out what group you're in and head over to that Padlet template. Okay, it should look something like this. I'm in group 3 right now. So on your own screen, keep Zoom up, but head over into your Padlet template. All right. Okay, can I get a thumbs up if you're over? Thumbs up, or you can also put a smiley face in the chat box if you made it over to Padlet. Okay. All right, great. So there are rules that we're following for the process, and that's what step 1 is. So normally we would have a full discussion about what those rules are. For now, I'm just going to read the rules. I want everybody to think for a second about what might be difficult about following those rules, and then we'll move on. Okay, so the 4 rules you're following as we ask questions in Padlet together. You're going to ask as many questions as you can. You're not going to stop to discuss, judge, or answer the questions. You're going to write down every question exactly as it first comes to mind. So you're not judging yourself as you're posting questions. And you're going to change any statements into a question. So anything that comes to mind that's more of an observation, you're changing that into a question form. So think for a few seconds, what might be difficult for you in following those rules? Okay. All right, well, you are now all deputized, which means you're all responsible for following the rules and holding everybody else as best you can to the rules. And we're going to move on to step 2. So as we move through here, I'm going to change the colors on the post-it, and Jay, Michelle, and Laura are going to help me do that for each group. So you'll see, if you get lost, you'll see the color yellow, and that means that's the step that we're currently working on as we go through here. So we reviewed the rules. We're now going to spend about a minute observing the question focus. And the question focus is what you're going to be asking questions about. So I'd like everybody, just for the next 30 seconds, you can read through the citation information. That's part of the question focus this time. And you can make this image, which is a primary source document, larger. And just spend about 30 seconds taking all that in, really looking at each part of the image, and then we're going to move on. So you're hearing 30 seconds of silence, you're just observing. Okay, so we are going to move on. It might feel a little bit quick today, but that's because we have so many good things to share with you. So you're thinking about that question focus. Let's move on to step 3 now. So I'm going to change the color again, and I'm changing the color on, theoretically, I'm changing the color here. There we go. Thanks, Michelle.
You got it.
So step 3, so we're asking questions. And I've given you a template here asking you to post in a specific way. So in the title section, you're going to put a question. You're going to put your initials in the write something section. And you can also feel free to read what other people are posting, comment on their post. You can move your posts. So you can click and drag your post over to the side to create more room or drag it down. So I'm going to give us 3 minutes just to post as many questions as you can on that Q focus we were just looking at. So follow the question, follow the rules, type as many questions as you can, try to read what other people are writing, and I'm going to come back in about 2 minutes. Your time starts now. So ask any questions that you can. And a reminder, you can click and pull your little sticky notes to the side so you can make some room. You have another minute. I encourage you, read what other people are writing. See if you want to write a question that builds off of theirs. And you can feel free to ask questions about the citation too. Now I get to go click through and see all of the different groups. All right, get that last question down. That's time. It is a very short time. So take a minute now. If you haven't had a chance, read what other people posted and click and drag your post-it notes so that they're not blocking any other posts. So you're adding on, if there's other questions people asked and you want to add a question related to that, go ahead and do that. And click and drag so you're not blocking anybody else's post. Okay. All right, let's move on to the next step. So we're moving on to step 4. So on to step 4. All right, so I'm going to ask you to think about 2 different types of questions. There are many types of questions for our purposes today. There are 2. There are close-ended questions, which can be answered with a yes or no or one word. And there are open-ended questions, which require a longer explanation. So normally we would label all of the questions. For now, for today, I just want you to go in, find one of your questions and see if you can label it either closed or open. So for now, you're just labeling C or O on one of your questions. And you can put that right next to your initials in the write something part of the post-it note. So let's take 30 seconds. It's short, but I think we can do it. Find one of your questions, see if you can label it C or O for closed or open. And the definitions are on that step 4 post-it. It looks like I'm seeing a bunch of questions labeled. Take a few more seconds. If you haven't had a chance, label C or O for closed or open. Okay. All right. So another part of this step, when we do the full QFT process, normally we would talk about some advantages and disadvantages to close-ended questions and some advantages and disadvantages to open-ended questions. If you can think of any, I'd invite you to just type a comment on this step 4 post-it. So if you can think of just off the top of your head an advantage or a disadvantage of either type of question, go ahead and add it to the comment box. Okay. All right, so we're going to move on to prioritizing questions. So we're on step 5, prioritizing questions. Oh, Jay beat me to it this time. Okay, so I'm going to give everybody, let's take a minute here. You're going to read through all of the questions that have been posted so far, and then you're picking 3 questions that you feel most curious about. To choose a priority question, you're going to vote on it by using this little heart icon in the bottom left-hand corner of each post. And you can vote on anyone's question. You can vote on yours, someone else's. You could vote on a question that you had built onto someone else's question in a comment. So any 3 questions. And I'm going to give us a minute just to read and sort through and pick those 3 priority questions. All right, you have priority questions. Did everyone pick some? All right. So it might be really interesting at this point to go through take a look at which of the priority questions that are getting pretty high numbers of likes on them, because it can be very challenging. If you have a class of 25 kids, you may not be able to use every single question that all 25 kids ask to the same degree. So it can be useful here just to take a look at, let's say, the top 10 questions that got the most likes. Okay. All right, so let's move on into further investigation here. So step 6, further investigation. I'm asking you to think about the questions that you selected, and if you can think of one idea of how you might pursue that question. So not necessarily with your teacher cap or your librarian cap on, but you personally, what would you do to go get some answers, do some exploring about one of your questions? And I'd like you to add that as a comment, if you can. You can add a comment either to the step 6 post, or you could add a comment on a specific question. So any ideas you have about how you might pursue that? Let's take a minute. So I see some comments going up. I have the benefit of being able to surf between all the groups here. Of course, you could go back and check some of the other groups out later too. So let's get down one last idea. How would you pursue answers to one of your priority questions? Okay, one of the things I really love about Padlet is instead of, you can ask children to think about what they might do to answer one of their questions. You could also give them some next steps right here in Padlet. So you could ask them, all right, I want you to go to the Library of Congress to this particular primary source set and do some research and report back. And you could do that without ever leaving Padlet, which is a really nice feature. Okay, so for now, let's move on to the reflection. And I have sort of a challenge in here for you. So we're moving on to step 7, reflection. And I'd like you do a little experimenting here if you're willing to. If you just want to drop a comment, that's fine too. But if you're willing to experiment, try doing an image or a voice recording. So we're asking you to think about, what did you learn, and or what are you now wondering about? So we could get a couple comments in here. That would be really exciting to see. If you're feeling daring, go ahead, try a picture or an audio recording. And those are some alternatives that are available to students too. So anything that you learned or that you're now wondering about. And let's take about a minute. Okay, this is great to see everybody's reflections. I wonder if I could ask Jay, Michelle, Laura, I know you all have been manning the chat box as we go, but are there things that you want to weigh in on Padlet here?
I love Padlet just because it's simplicity. You know, the posts are all set up the same, but they're so versatile. So there's a lot of different ways you can use it. For using Padlet for the QFT, it's nice because you have so many different options all in one place. It's not necessarily as linear as some of the other tools, but the way Sarah set it up makes it really nice. So you have the steps and you just kind of follow along as the facilitator leads it. And then it's great for, you know, the reflection, as Sarah's demonstrating here, that you can just type in your comments, you can add an image, you can record yourself giving your reflection on the process.
Thanks, Jay. I have a show notes section down at the bottom here, and I'm pulling a resource in here from Laura and Michelle that they've already done on Padlet too. And then I did my own sort of guides, also doing some experiments. So this might be a good thing for those of you who are really thinking more about the Padlet features. Michelle and Laura, what were things that you were finding about Padlet?
I was just going to jump in and say, I think it's really a wonderful tool for differentiation. Padlet levels the playing field for kiddos. With being able to do the audio, add an easy visual piece to it, and also text. It sounds funny, but we know as teachers that sometimes a lot of text can be intimidating. Using a Padlet to be able to post allows some flexibility for students in their responses, and it may not be as intimidating as writing on a wall or on a sheet where you say you have to write about this. They can interact and really kind of be at the same level of their peers. And so it's really nice to do that. I think the visual and the audio piece is also wonderful as an add-on. And the one thing I really like, I know we're having a couple people that have had a few tweaky challenges tonight. Padlet does come in an app as well, and it's pretty friendly in the mobile device realm, as well as being on a Web 2.0 device or a Chrome that most of our kiddos are using. So it really goes back and forth between the devices, which allows some more flexibility for kiddos who may not have access to a computer at home. Whether they have a computer and the rest of the family's using it, or as we know, some of our kids are more friendly just with their mobile device. And Padlet walks between those two pretty well.
The other thing I would add, and you'll probably hear us refer to that a few times tonight, is especially during this time of remote learning, something that students can do when it's convenient for them. So they could get in, and we saw how Sarah led this, but they could get in on their own and do this as an asynchronous lesson if they needed to, which we're finding that we have to offer that kind of flexibility more and more for our students, especially as they're learning from home. So Padlet does give you that option too.
I have a template down here that I made specifically to work asynchronously. So if you don't have access to Zoom or Meet or anything like that, you could consider doing it spread over little bits, spread over several days. And I just want to show everyone while we're here, I was working with a teacher in Eastern Kentucky, and she did this yesterday. She did it completely asynchronously. And these are 5th graders who are learning about manifest destiny. I said the right thing, right? Manifest destiny, primary source people. So I just to show you, again, these are 5th graders. You can see it does get a little messy. So potentially you might want to do groups like we did today, or you could also do groups on the same Padlet, just having some dividing lines. So these are all the student questions.
And can I mention something really quick while you're there, Sarah? If you all notice, for those of you who are not familiar with Padlet, the anonymous piece here is really great. You can, and I know that Ellen mentioned this in the chat, it's really nice to be able to have attribution on the Padlet, but you can also turn the attribution off too. So you can actually do both midstream. So if you'd like to see who's posting the questions and see if the students have contributed, you can do that. But then maybe when you go to another set or section of the question formulation technique, you can turn that attribution off so that nobody knows who asked the question. and the voting can take place too. So that's a really nice piece. Not all technology tools allow for that, and Padlet does, and you can just change it midstream. So, and
we have someone asking how to do that.
yeah,
I think did you just do that, Sarah?
Oh, I definitely did not just do that. I had you. That's an advanced question. I'm going to put.
I'll tell you what. I'll stick the instructions in the chat box so that you guys have it. It's pretty simple. It's about 3 steps. So let's go ahead and keep going. And I'm going to throw that right in, and it'll just take me a sec to do that.
Thank you. Thank you all so much for those tips. If you don't know Padlet, you can remake very easily. So you can really just completely replicate a template if that's something that you liked. I want to give you just some suggestions I had for what you can do with student questions after you get them in a format like this. And again, you could send them off to do some research and report back. You could screencast a lecture, have them post questions in Padlet as they listen to a lecture. And you could lead into an observe, reflect, wonder from that too. So there are all kinds of options for next steps. You've been asking questions as we go, which is fantastic. Please keep doing that. And I wanted Katy to share a little bit. We have all of these resources around Padlet and a few other tools on our website now, and they are free to use. We just ask that you cite Right Question as the source. Katy, do you want to share a little bit what we have going on at rightquestion.org?
Sure. So I think people were already asking about how they can get access to Sarah's videos and Padlet. So we have a page, a new page with virtual learning toolkits, and one of those is a Padlet toolkit. So this is the URL. You do have to register, but it's free. It's just your email. And then you can download everything and remake and make a copy. Yeah, and then other things that we have at rightquestion.org, we have more webinars like this one. So this is the link here. If you want to see like upcoming events, I just showed that we also have offline resources. So some people might have students who don't have access to Wi-Fi or who don't have access to devices. So this link takes you right to a student worksheet so they can do the QFT at home, and it's like printable. Yeah, so lots of different options, and we're adding more stuff every day.
So if you have feedback and suggestions, send them our way. You very well might see yourself incorporated into our next, whatever the next template is that we put up there. And we really value hearing from you. So thank you all so much. I'm going to hand this over to Jay, Michelle, and Laura. And I can't wait to see what you put in the chat box. I haven't looked at it yet. So I'm going to stop sharing here. Everybody, if you want to take a stretch break while we're shifting facilitators here, go ahead and do that. I hear it's good for your health. I haven't tried it, so I don't know.
I know all this.
So I know there were a couple questions about attribution, and it's a good time to have a conversation just for a tad. Jay made a really good point that even if you've got attribution turned on, if a student can post if they're not logged in. So we really have a conversation with our kiddos about ensuring that they're logging in with their Google account or that they are logged into Padlet. So that their posts there, that's a digital footprint conversation that we kind of start at the beginning of the year with our students about the stories they leave, the primary sources they create, and their research and inquiry that they're doing. And so sometimes it helps to have that conversation and reiterate it when you're using tools like this. We don't have a lot of that, but at the same time, it's something that's important to remember. If a student isn't logged in, you may miss their name there. So that can be a challenge sometimes. So, all right.
Okay. So I think if Jay or Michelle, if you'll put those links in the chat, or you can grab these bit.lys. We will need you to be in this slide deck to access some of the things for our next tool that we're going to try with the question formulation technique. So we want to give you some really good ideas. We have a couple of things that we think are workhorses around this formulation technique, and Padlet was one that you just saw, but we're going to walk through another one, walk through it, and then also tell you about some other tools that you could use for this as well. So just a little, this is what we did. We just walked through producing your own questions, improve the questions, strategize, and reflect. So we did the rules. So there are the rules again, just for your reference. Ask as many questions as you can. There's no red pencil marks. It's all judgment-free, right? So I'd like you to click on this link, and maybe, Michelle, if you can post that in the chat as well. We're going to give you 2 minutes. So really, when you go into, I'm going to go out. When you go into this link, this is just a great collaboration tool, like a good old Google Doc. So if you'll find your first name, if it's A through J, or you can click down and go, if your first name starts with K through P or Q through Z. And we just want you to ask as many questions. Just choose a row that you can start typing in. You can type 1 question, you can type 10 questions, but the question is around facilitating the question formulation technique virtually. What questions do you have around that statement? So find a spot in this Google Doc, and we're hoping this kind of shows you how you could organize a Google Doc with your class, with your kids, but find a spot. Let's give you about 2 minutes. Think of how many questions you have around this.
Feel free to jump in. I see people that are hopping in right now. The link is in the chat box for y'all. It's the last one we did post. And Laura, can you go back to the first page for just a second? We've got that request of the presentation. Can you do that for just a minute? Although the links are in there too. So just so you know that.
There you go.
Jay has posted them in there. We've got 2 different URLs there, but if you click on that last one in the chat box, that's going to take you to that interactive Google Doc that we're working with right now.
So I'm going to give you just a few more minutes, or a few more seconds, really.
Yeah, Laura, let's give a couple minutes. So we keep seeing the numbers go up. People are in there, but it's taken just a tad to get in.
Okay.
And the Q focus is posted at the top of the document. I don't know if you want to read that again, Laura.
Facilitating the question formulation technique virtually. What questions do you have around this? And a question focus, so the thing that you saw in Padlet was really that primary source document. Sometimes it can be a quote. It's never a question, but it's some kind of a statement or an idea or a primary source or something to generate questions for somebody.
So thanks, Laura. It looks like we've got a whole pile going in there, as you can see.
So think about, you know, how this, don't you love, I love seeing a Google Doc kind of, a lot of people in a Google Doc working at once.
Exactly.
So we did the closed or the open. So I'd like you to go back and look, and in your Google Doc, so if you could just highlight, well, let's go back. Choose one question that you could do an open or closed and put a C or an O by it. Which question that you might change to an open or a closed question?
And some of you guys had a question about not having an open cell. You can either add at the bottom or scroll down. Notice there's some at the bottom. Doesn't matter if that's not your last name. Just pop in there. We don't mind. We're not going to hold it against you. Just stick it in there. It's all good.
Right click and add a
right click and add a row if you want to, but if you just want to scroll down and hop in, that's great too. Not a problem.
So something
and I will let you know that we're not going to be able to answer every single question tonight, but Laura and I, we will put this in a shared document and ensure that we have this available to you and get it to you. We'll post it in a couple places and make sure that it's available to you, and we'll answer it. And it will be located at this URL, but we will make sure, we've got a way to get it to you. So we will make sure that happens.
So notice we've opened this up for anybody could edit, right? So we're seeing anonymous alligators and everybody, but you can, when you're in a Google Doc, you can see your students' names and who is adding. You can also check version history and see who's been in there too. All right, so you've got some questions. Some of you have added an O or a C. The next thing I'd like you to think about is to choose 3 questions you consider most important and highlight them. So kind of work through the document like we did with the Padlet, but you can go through and look at all the questions and then just highlight one that you think is important. So to highlight in a Google Doc, you just highlight and then you go up to this tool to highlight a color and you can choose whatever color you'd like, whatever makes sense. And we're kind of going to go through this quickly because we want to talk about some other tools too. And after you prioritize and highlight, then you can use the commenting feature in a Google Doc and talk about why you chose that, or maybe that's why that's a favorite document or favorite question. So this is one that I chose and I highlighted it. So if I highlighted that, you'll notice that over here, I get this plus sign that shows up with a highlight. If I click on that and add a comment, then I can write, you know, why I chose this or another question that I have, or what you're doing with the QFT. How else would you do that? You can also assign this to somebody. If you put a plus sign, you can also choose someone and assign that comment and ask them to do something with that too. So this tool can be a workhorse too inside of your Google Docs, right?
And you can use this individually, but also collaboratively. Think of your Kagan structures as well with this. If you have assigned groups at a table that are working together, you can have a scribe, a leader, a writer, and they can be doing the commenting together as well. So there's lots of ways that you can work with this, as both asynchronously and also synchronously in both cases. So it really works inside and outside of the classroom. You can do this as an inside classroom piece if you'd like, or in a flipped learning environment too.
So that's a question too, Adam, that the document was confusing. That's one reason why we added some of these, this table, the rows to kind of start. You could assign a student, you could number, you know, put another column here and put numbers and assign students numbers. So you do have some ways that you can organize a Google Doc too, even more than this.
I think also to Adam's point, you know, we want you to experience sort of these different ways of doing it. We tried Padlet, we're doing Google Docs. Google Docs is something that most people have access to. And we have a list of a whole bunch of different tech tools that can be used. They all kind of have their pros and cons. So, you know, experimenting with them and figuring out what works best for you. A lot depends on your context. Also, depending if you're doing it synchronously or asynchronously, you know, synchronously doing it through something like Zoom or Google Meet might work nicely, but that might not be the reality for a lot of us right now, as we have students that aren't able to access it all at the same time. So all of these tools we're kind of testing out and tinkering with and trying to figure out what works best for us. But that's why we have these resources here for you that sort of go over some of those pluses and minuses of all the various tools, or using them for different parts of the QFT process.
So that kind of leads us right in, and we worried we had too much, but we do have these resources that we built for you in terms of just some other tools that you could use with this process. So there's Padlet, Google Docs, Screencastify, and I'm going to kind of turn this over to Michelle and Jay, and then I'll just kind of drive. You tell me where you want to go.
That's all good. So I just really want Laura to show that. Stay right there, Laura, for just a second. We've got a couple tools here that we want to talk about. And just briefly, we're not going to dive in because you've got a ton of questions, and a lot of those have to do with the question formulation technique with technology tools. We have really power packed this presentation, so you've got resource materials. This grid gives you a little bit of an eyeball look, just an overview at what some of these tools can do for you with the different processes and the different steps of the question formulation technique. And so you can just take a quick glance and pick a tool that may work for you. But then, how do you use it? That's what goes into the sheet that Laura just showed you. We gave you some hot tips, some links to say, these are some pros and cons. These are some things that we believe you may be able to do. There's some things that we've tried, some true and tested ideas that we know are working in the classroom. But then in addition to that, some real tips and tricks that may make it easier and faster. Because a lot of us do some of this on the fly. Laura and I are case in point in that. I know Jay's done this too before, where you've had an idea and you've had to flip something really quick. A lot of these tools may be familiar to you. There may be some that aren't as familiar as you're used to. Laura, could you go on then and show what the next step is? So we have that overview sheet for you. We have this resource doc for you. And then we've got a couple build outs just to show you something else. And we built something that's a little more specific for you. And if you look at that, you'll see that in the folder, we've got a couple, and there's going to be more coming. So keep a hold of this link that takes you to the folder. That's going to be the Western Region TPS one. We have built out the Padlet to give you suggestions around each different tool. This one's the Padlet one. So we're showing you the step, giving you some ideas on how to use it, then some general tips about the tool itself. And then if you scroll down to the bottom, if you've never used the tool, we're going to give you some resources, some past webinars, a one-pager. This is how you do it in a flash. If you needed to know something, there it is. And we're going to post this link back in chat, but I want to go back to the questions and really take a little bit. And Katy, I'm going to ask that you and Sarah jump in to help us with those questions, because we don't have a lot of time until the top of the hour. And Jay has got something special for us to do at the end. So if we could take about 5 minutes and then, well, maybe 4, and answer a few questions, and then we're going to jump into Jay's at the end. And I'll put that link in there. Actually, Sarah just popped it in for you, and we'll make sure that it's there. So I'm turning it over to y'all for questions, okay?
It is really amazing to see all of the questions in that Google Doc. I pulled out a couple patterns. So one thing I saw was just about younger students, like how do you address certain challenges, particularly some questions around, keeping things appropriate. No, I don't know, the asynchronous tools, synchronous tools, and younger students.
Sometimes the younger students, it's easier to have a tool that they can ask a question with audio. We're using Seesaw a lot with, in terms of them, they can create a short video or audio, and then it just depends on how you are setting up these resources with your students. It can really work at all age levels. It's just giving them the tools and setting it up and scaffolding that along the way, and just a lot of modeling. But we work with really young kids in Padlet and in Google Docs, right?
Yeah. And I will suggest too that it really does go to the lower grades. I know some people have said, well, I've done it with 3rd grade and that's a little young. We've done it with kindergartners and we've made it happen with kinders. Now it's not the full process, but it's the beginning, and they can understand an open and closed question, but they sure can understand how to ask questions, and they have absolutely no inhibition around that. Padlet allows them to do that audio piece, so a headset really works well for that. Clicking and then recording something makes it simple for them, even for littles. So that might be something to think about.
I saw a lot of questions about facilitating conversations between kids when you don't have access to a synchronous tool, and I think a lot of people were speaking to that about the QFT specifically too, that there's something important about the collaboration. And so how do you do that asynchronously?
Yeah, I think, you know, not being there in person where kids are able to be in groups and hear other people's questions and sort of feed off that makes it, the asynchronous, a big challenge. So, you know, something nice about Padlet, for example, is you could have students go in and add their own questions. And if you're one of the first students in there, there's not a whole lot, but then come back to it at a later time and then look at the other questions. So maybe giving a window of time that they're going in and producing those questions. Using some of the other tools as well, just giving them multiple opportunities to add their questions and then feed off of the other ideas of students in the class.
We ask the kiddos to do what we call a 2-2-1. So they post 2 questions. That's there for in an asynchronous format. Then they have to wait 24 hours, and then they post 2 more, or comment on, you know, look at what has built across the Padlet, post 2 more. And then the last one part is actually a bit of a tweak for us. We ask them to go in and look at the questions and then post one last one that builds on somebody else's question to really encourage them to critically look instead of just take a quick overview. So now I can actually go in and say 2-2-1 and my kids are like, okay, but they know that they have to make 2 comments, go back, make another 2, and then really carefully read for that last one. And that encourages exactly what Jay's talking about, going back, revisiting, critically thinking in an asynchronous format. And the questions get better over time. They really do, especially when you tell your kiddos you're not allowed to repeat anything. Try that one with middle schoolers and secondary. You can't repeat a question. It works. So
one thing, we need to wrap this up and give time for a reflection, but we want you to know that in this document, we will add another column and answer all of these questions. So if you have more questions, go ahead and put them here and we will answer those and make sure that we have that for you and you have your answers. So let's turn the time over to Jay for about a 5-minute reflection.
All right, thank you. So in the interest of time, I won't do sort of a full overview of Flipgrid, but for those of you that are not familiar, Flipgrid is a collection of short videos where students are able to go in, record themselves, answering a question, responding to a prompt, sharing things. So it records them speaking. You then take a selfie picture that shows up on the grid, and then you have a collection of these videos that are available to you. Teachers, when they set up those grids, can allow students to reply to each other. So it could be a tool that's used for collecting the questions, and then students record themselves asking their questions, and then go back in and maybe add more questions after watching other students. When teachers are setting it up, you can also have it be a recording anywhere from 15 seconds to 5 minutes. But I think Flipgrid is a perfect tool for the reflection piece. So that's what we're going to do right now. So in the chat, I just put a link to the Flipgrid that we're going to use. It's also on this slide. If you can advance it there, it should be on there. But you're going to respond to 2 questions. What did you learn? And how did you learn it? Actually, I tweaked the question, and it was, what did you learn? And how are you going to use what you learned? So if you could go to that Flipgrid link there, there is a big green circle with a plus on it. You just click on that plus, and then you're going to record yourself answering those 2 questions. When you're good with your recording, there are little fun things you can add to it, little stickers and things. But when you're done recording, it will then have you take a snapshot of yourself. That's what will show up on the grid. And again, you can add fun things to that. This can continue on after the webinar, so that will be available and open to you. But we can have you all go in and record yourself. You have 1 minute and 30 seconds to answer those 2 questions. And then that document will live on.
There you go. And all of the resources, including the links that are here, Right Question will be posting these as we get our webinar together. So the resources will be there for you. In addition, the 2 Geeky Teachers will put it out on 2geekyteachers.com so that it's on the front page. And that's where you'll find your answers to your questions tomorrow. I think we'll include those probably with the Right Question Institute work as well. But we know that we'll get them up in a flash on 2 Geeky. So if you need to find them tomorrow and you have a burning question, you can definitely hit that. Give us until the afternoon because we're all teaching too, but we'll make sure that we get that column added and answer your questions.
We'll kind of show you a little bit. So when you go in, can you see my recording? Very easy. You can add a selfie, you can add stickers, you can add text, all kinds of things. You can record. Once you're done, you're happy with your recording. You can, easy. You can add a selfie. You can add stickers. You can add. Then once you like that, then you take a selfie, and then you can even add some other stickers and fun things. So it's great to submit your video, and then it shows up in the Flipgrid. So then other
let me just say, Laura, I am taking that selfie and putting it on Twitter.
And I just wanted to add one more general comment. I saw some people that were kind of lost, or there might have felt overwhelming. Especially these ladies have provided you with these documents with a whole bunch of great resources. If you're new to a lot of this, just start somewhere with one of them. It can be definitely overwhelming to try and do too much. So maybe start with something like Padlet and just give the QFT a try using that. And then after you've done that, you'll figure out the pros and cons of that. And then you might want to bring in something like Flipgrid or one of the other tools. So start small, start with something maybe you're familiar with, and then bring in sort of these tools one at a time.
Great advice.
So we had a question in the chat box as well about having students write down their questions and then post to Padlet, or just post to Padlet. I have to be honest, I just allow my students to post, but we do have a conversation about not copying other questions as they proceed forward. And that's why we kind of do the 2-2-1 in my class, because there's some overlap in the very first analysis piece, but as we push them forward to kind of move up that critical thinking piece and continue to post, we're asking them to post original questions. But you can surely have them write down and brainstorm and then ask them to put several of those questions up. We also kind of tease our kids in the asynchronous format and say first come, first serve. If you've got the good question and you're up there first, then guess who gets it? And we tease them a little bit about that too. So really it's up to you and how your students are engaging in this way. It's a different modality for all of us, but also it's a modality that we believe is transferable between what we're doing in remote learning to what we do in the classroom in the fall, we hope, or in remote again. So we hope that you can use these tools as you move into a blended environment too. So you might think about that. And I'm going to turn it back to Kyle and Keith and Katie and Sarah and Right Question and let you guys close up.
Well, wow, thank you so much. I feel like I need to go back through and read all of the documents and get started on some of these questions. So it's really amazing. And I just want to, reiterate what I heard Michelle saying, which is that, we're all in a really uncertain, sort of stressful time. And so are our students. And learning these tools for some of us is a necessity. But I really do think that it could be a great opportunity in some way. And I think a lot of these tools are certainly transferable when we're back in working in person. And I definitely think investing in questioning and curiosity right now is really important, for engagement and for kids being able to problem solve and navigate situations that are really uncertain and stressful and complicated. You really can't do better than having the right question. So my hope is that if we are all working together to invest now as best we can, it's going to pay dividends when we're back.
Yeah, thanks so much. And a huge thank you to all of you, Sarah, Katy, Jay, Michelle, Laura, for providing these awesome thinking strategies and tech tools and teacher tested ideas to help folks out right now. Thanks to Keith and Crystal for manning the chat room as well. And of course, to the Library of Congress for making these webinars possible through the Teaching with Primary Sources program. As a reminder, for those of you who would like the professional development certificate, if one of you want to share your screen and show the outro slide, we'll be providing this link here. Here, I can share my screen.
I'm sharing, aren't I? Oh, is it not? Sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah? Oh.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry. To get your certificate, it's bit.ly/PS Teaching Online. So fill out that certificate with a short reflection and then your contact information on where we can send the certificate. Also, all resources will be shared on the TPS Teachers Network. Soon we'll get those uploaded to YouTube. They'll be on the TPS Colorado YouTube page. And once again, thank you all for participating. I'll post some of these links here in the chat. And thanks again, everybody.